Oh, hey buddy, it's your old pal Scott. This is Let's Talk Tabletop. Something I've been concerned about lately is that it doesn't seem like there's many children or young people under the age of, let's say, 18 that are getting into wargaming. And that's really concerning because all of us that are currently in it are not getting any younger. I really feel like Dungeons and Dragons is spanking wargaming when it comes to including the younger generations. And obviously there's many reasons for that. D&D is extremely easy to get into, right? You don't even have to buy the player's handbook if you don't want to. You don't have to buy miniatures. You don't have to do any of that if you want to join like a school club or something like that. So obviously it's much, much easier, and the hurdle or the barrier to entry is far less than wargaming. But there's more to it than that, because children do have, or at least teenagers do have some money to spend. And if I got you guys to tell me when you got into wargaming, many of you that are my age or older got into it when you were a child or a teenager. I was a bit of a late bloomer. I got in when I was 25, roughly, 24, something like that. But I didn't even know about wargaming prior to then. But the point is that the price point for a lot of wargaming is just far too high for children. Now, obviously, there's a lot of war games out there that are affordable to get into, or they're model agnostic. You can use whatever models you want, etc. But of course, the elephant in the room is Games Workshop. And Games Workshop is exorbitantly priced. Whereas even people like me, like middle-class people, are having a harder and harder time justifying these purchases. It used to be that a starter set was $80, a two-player starter set for Warhammer, and now it's $220 or something like that. And it's just completely asinine, like completely ridiculous. Now, Games Workshop is not all of its competitors, though. There are a lot of games that are a lot more reasonably priced, but I still don't think that's the issue. Now, obviously, Warhammer is not the only miniature game out there for wargaming, but it is the one front and center, and it's the one that most of us got started with. So, how do people exactly go about getting children or young people into this hobby when things like Dungeons and Dragons are just gobbling them up because it's so much easier to get into and cheaper to play? How do we exactly get people into this hobby? Well, one thing is the price point. You definitely would have to work on the price point if you're talking Games Workshop, but there's a lot of companies out there that are way cheaper to get into. But the problem is they don't have that exposure. It's kind of like a weird chicken and the egg scenario, because if you don't have a huge critical mass of players playing one of these more affordable games, then most people, especially children in this case, will never be exposed to it, or the likelihood is going to be way lower that they're exposed to it. So, how do you get people into a game if the reason they're not into a game is because other people aren't into that game? That's a really tough nut to crack as far as that goes. I just don't see children getting into wargaming as much. Now, anecdotally, I have 2 people under the age of 18 in our gaming group. And previous to that, we had 1 person under the age of 18 in the last 15 years. Okay? And I do have a club that I do at the library each month for teens for Warhammer. And we do have 1 child that's about 10 and 2 of them that are 15. But that's not much in the way of things. So I can think of 5 children, but how many adult Wargamers do I know? Well over 100. Personally, no. Well over 100 Wargamers because of my convention, Shorehammer. And I'm thinking to myself, that's really not good. And the same thing goes for comic books. Comic books and their industry have a similar issue, where most of the comic book readers are not young people. Most of them are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and up. They're not really 20-year-olds. They're not really teens or anything like that. And comic books have the same exact issue that wargaming in general, and I really am talking about Warhammer, the price for comics used to be like $1 in the 70s, right? And kids could get it with their pocket change. Well, now comic books are like $5, $6 a piece, which is way harder to justify on a child's allowance or their budget or anything like that. Another problem that wargaming has is that people, and especially children, have a lot more entertainment options. It was different back in the 70s or the 80s if you and a bunch of friends got together and played some wargaming with your paper cutouts or whatever you wanted to do, because there was far less to take your attention. Now with mobile gaming, online gaming, consoles, PC, board games, I mean anything, there's television show, there's streaming, movies, etc. There's so much to divide your time between, and children are way more apt to go for something that's flashy and brightly colored and is gonna make them dump serotonin into their brain before they go to a protracted 3-hour miniatures game, or the delayed gratification of having to take hours to paint your miniatures or assemble them. I just don't see that there's any way to get children into this hobby. Now, maybe this isn't really a problem. Maybe because adults are the ones that are the big spenders anyway, right? Children are going to be buying a little unit here or there, and especially a game company like Games Workshop, they really want the whales. They really want those players that are going to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on armies. Maybe they're not really focusing on kids. Maybe they've thought that children is a foregone opportunity. They're just not going to get children. Now, I do know that when my children's friends see my wargaming and stuff, they're all fascinated by it, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's so cool!" You know. So I don't know if they are taking that stance. I don't know if that's actually accurate, because children still really like miniature stuff, and children by default like toys, which is basically what miniatures are. Sorry if I offended some of you, but you know it's true. So a combination of too many things in their entertainment circle, right, for them to be entertained by, and Dungeons & Dragons, if they did have the inclination for miniature gaming, Dungeons & Dragons just snatches them up immediately because of the recent popularity of that in recent years. And not to mention the price point is way high, and the assembly and all the delayed gratification that goes into it is not really geared towards the younger generations. So maybe that's not a problem. Maybe these kids will eventually grow up and get into wargaming, but you gotta hope that you are getting new people into wargaming in general, because that's all you're gonna have in the future. Obviously, when all of us current players die out, what do you have left? You're gonna need new people, right? And it's kind of a shame to me that some of the smaller, more affordable games, such as Bolt Action, or Flames of War, or Mantic's games like Kings of War, or even Malifaux. There's a lot of games out there that are far more affordable than Warhammer, and it's just a shame that none of them have really captured enough market to be the face of wargaming the way that Warhammer is. And that's a real shame, because it's preventing new people from getting into it because of Warhammer's high price point. The likelihood is that people are only ever going to be exposed to Warhammer, right? That's the highest percentage. And when they see that price point is super, super high, they're going to go, oh, all of Wargaming is super high. I'm just going to go play D&D for free. That's what they're going to do. So I want you guys to let me know 2 things in the comments. I would like to know how many people under 18 that you know of personally that actually wargame versus the number of adults that you know personally. Like I said, I know 4 children under the age of 18, and I know well over 100 adults that play wargaming. Okay? That's a huge disparity. How many adults that you personally know, just a ballpark estimate, that play Warhammer or wargaming, and then how many children do you know? The second thing is what is the age you were when you got into wargaming? I'd be very interested to find that out. And I'm willing to bet that most people are going to say in their teens, or maybe even younger than that. So, thank you so much for watching my video, and please like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. I would greatly appreciate it. And please let me know in the comments. I'm really hoping for a good conversation here, because my suspicion, I'm pretty sure I'm right, that you guys got started pretty young, and you don't know many kids that actually play. Anyway, I'll see you next week. This week's episode is brought to you by Patreon patron Will Walker. Thank you so much for supporting the show.